Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: what was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I taught my 6th grade students about democratic processes, and we ran a simulation. Without fail, every one of my classes tried to impeach me. Well, I feel a lot less original now, LMAO. I'm a college student, and last year we had a class about Congress in which part of the class was simulation based. I got the idea to impeach our professor, and it soon became a bipartisan effort. Professor was pretty cool about it. When we submitted the articles, one of which included accusing him of murdering Jeffrey Epstein, he jokingly banged his fists on the table and called us all traitors. After the impeachment vote passed, the speaker told him the Senate will decide your fate, and he was in the loop enough to know that the acceptable response was I am the Senate. Edit: we did end up successfully removing him from office. Before these shenanigans started, I asked him casually who the VP was, in case the Senate ends up in a tie vote. As a result, we already knew who his successor would be, in this case the TA. Edit 2: because some people seem to have trouble believing this is a real story, here is a link to an excerpt from a memo I had to write near the end of the semester. You can see references to the impeachment on the lower left-hand corner, along with Epstein. My professor was also pretty young, so it's not really surprising that he'd know a lot about the Star Wars prequels. Your professor, this is outrageous, it's unfair. How can you be the professor in charge and not have dictatorial authority? Should have played monarchy instead. As long as you don't have a guillotine in your class. Did your parents sign the permission slip for the execution? We had an our lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse. Just spits out, "Oh, these are the warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him, we knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Our lady doesn't seem to care about human relations. She would order lunches at work for beating goals only for office people. Production and warehouse teams would come in and be told, "Oh, none of this is for you. But we make and ship the products, but that doesn't matter, I guess." Sounds like the hour department at the warehouse I used to work at. It always blew my mind because the place was a distribution center. The guys in the warehouse were literally the most important staff in the building, since we were the ones picking the orders and sending them to the trucks, but any time you had to talk to them, they treated you like a nuisance. Fuckers always had huge lunches and social gatherings and whatnot for the office people, almost never for us. I didn't feel much sympathy when a huge chunk of everybody in the office got laid off, and not a single order picker lost his job. Edit: Goddammit, I've never even seen a full episode of The Office. That shows you who really counts. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again, typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request. See who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. So we agree, great. I've managed service industry for years, and the number of people who make that threat having never spent a penny is baffling, especially this year. I swear it's once a week right now that after I tell somebody to leave and not return, they've threatened not to return. I've had to have police remove people and they'll scream about how they'll never return on their way out. Are the police dragging you out not enough of a sign that that's exactly what I want? What about the criminal trespassing notice you got? A co-worker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas and he was able to upgrade to a first-class seat. We had this bitch sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant MC mansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first-class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got that seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first-class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class, and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally he tells her she has to go back to her seat, or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first-class cabin. And to think that is someone's boss rip. In my experience, so far anyway, all the worst people hold positions of power. This one just makes me sad. People who really internalize that a corporate ladder has any relation to people's worth are only hurting themselves in the end. I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12-plus-hour days 6 days a week and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as hell from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking shit. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is fucked up and the department manager was a total moron and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know shit about my industry and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bitch my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only could fire him. I said right. He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. As my previous foreman would say, I can fix dumb but I can't fix stupid. I had a boss whose #1 hiring philosophy was we can teach people work skills, but we can't teach them what their parents should have taught them. Been a guiding principle for me when hiring ever since. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing putting a dish on his house. I let him know that I pay the mortgage now and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Edit. I didn't expect to see all this when I checked Reddit again. I'll try to answer questions and things below. I like the jokes, probably a coping mechanism lol. Edit 2. I see a lot of people talking about the deed and wanted to say something about that. I'm not sure which of my parents' names were on the deed, but what I did know is that if I didn't pay it, it was going to foreclosure. We already had warnings and it wasn't the first time that had happened. I was young when this all happened and probably didn't even know what a deed or title was at that time. If I stopped paying, we no longer had a house. A constant argument from parents to their kids is that they pay for the roof over your head, so you'll do what they tell you. They rarely say I own the deed, you do what I tell you. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants. Which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the fuck he was doing here. He started in on me again and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the all hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I've got a similar story. Many years ago, we fired a salesperson. She was a compulsive liar and unethical as hell. She was also living under the delusion that the place would fall apart without her, and that we'd be begging her to come back in a couple of weeks. So it didn't sit too well with her when we hired her replacement. His first day on the job, she calls him up to cuss him out for stealing her job. Later that day, she called corporate. I understand their conversation went like this. That bastard's trying to steal my clients. He's going around town telling people he replaced me. Corporate, he did replace you. Harass him again or any other employees and we're calling the cops. That finally convinced her that we weren't going to be begging her to come back. Edit, typos. Compulsive liar and unethical. Sounds like a great salesperson.